Okay, we're ready to start now. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks very much. Welcome to the Joint Archives Committee on the 20th of October 2020. We're live streaming for this meeting, a remote meeting, and we can start the agenda. Okay. The first item is apologies for absence.
Thank you, Chair. We have apologies for absence from Councillor Mika Smiles. Thank you.
Thank you. Any declarations of interest? There are none. Number 3, minutes of the meeting held on the 11th of February 2020. Can we approve the minutes?
Move them.
Agreed.
Approve the meetings on the 11th of February. Okay. So we move on to number 4, budget update. The Archives Manager will provide an update on the budget to the committee. Over to you.
Hello everyone. Well, as I'm sure you'll all see, there aren't any problems with the budget this year. We are doing okay with our income targets, which is good considering we've been closed for quite a long time. You will see that there is on the budget money carried forward that's been carried forward from the previous 2 financial years that we will either look at spending, or if not, we will be returning it to the authorities. We have yet to issue the invoices for this financial year because we've been waiting for a decision on what we do about Born Digital Records, which is later on in the agenda. So once we come to a decision, we can move on with that. I don't know if anyone's any questions for me.
Councillor Kay.
Yes, to what extent in meeting your budget have you been affected by the pandemic?
Have we been affected by the pandemic?
Has it made any difference?
Well, it's made a little bit of difference because we were closed for quite a long time, which means that we haven't had as many people through the door. We haven't been able to do events or any of that type of thing. But during the time that the services were closed, we came in once a week to deal with things. So if we had requests for paid research, we were dealing with those. And we were dealing with requests for access to records, not really to do with the budget, but for people like the police or the courts if they needed access to the records. But on the whole, we were lucky that we were able to work from home. So luckily for us, we've been supplied with agile working by the council, and it gave us a chance to catch up with some of our other jobs that we don't normally get a chance to do. And we've added a lot of catalogues onto the internet, for example, which improves accessibility. But in terms of the budget, we're doing okay in terms of making money. I might not quite make the income targets. It's hard to say because we've still got a few months to go, but I would expect to be very close to getting there.
Thank you.
Councillor Kay, do you want to come back?
No, that was adequate, thank you. Thanks very much, Ruth.
Okay.
Okay. I always ask about officers in the pandemic and also their welfare in the whole at the moment. Have you got staff applicable at the moment with COVID or not? And also any issues about your work in the Archives Committee?
We've been able to carry on working. A couple of my staff did other jobs. My front of house staff did other jobs to help out during the pandemic in terms of they helped answer phones and put together food parcels, that type of thing. But otherwise, we've been fine. You know, the staff. I think some people have found it more difficult than others. I personally find it difficult to work from home because I live on my own, and it is very isolating. But our head of service, we had Leanne Littlewood at the time, who's acting head of service, was very good, and she made sure that we had regular get-togethers with managers and other parts of the service. And we did, as I said, come into work once a week, because with a building like this, you have to check everything's okay. And we were checking up on that our safety checks were up to date. So things like our sprinkler system and smoke detectors, fire alarms. But on the whole, we got through it. I would say we got through it pretty much unscathed, and we were able to stay on top of our inquiries, because we have had agile working, so people could phone us up, they could contact us by email. So we were okay in that respect.
Thanks very much. Any other comments or questions on the budget? Okay. So the number 5 is Director of Regeneration and Culture will provide a verbal update to the board this afternoon. Over to you.
Thank you, Chair. Can everybody hear me okay? Yeah, good. Lots of nods. I'm afraid I don't recognise any of the faces, but any of you who've been on this committee for a good few years will have heard me say a lot of this before, because archives has been in my portfolio a couple of times, that we know that the building is completely unsuitable for an archive. It's getting worse. It's getting worse quicker, and we need to do something about it. But again, I've stood here or sat here before and said that in the past. The thing that's prevented that happening is the lack of a viable plan B. We've done a number of funding bids to different sources for new archive buildings. We've looked at a range of other potential solutions and have come out really on the side of, unless it's a big injection of external funding, then it's just not going to be able to be possible. And obviously that would be many, many millions of pounds. Now, funding at the moment for that kind of activity is very difficult. So we know we've had to look at some different options. So we've had a look, and one of the triggers for this was the state of the building, obviously during the coronavirus break, and Ruth's staff have had to deal with some awful situations in there, some dangerous ones by the sound of it. So we've done another thorough options appraisal, and I'll be intending to circulate that fairly soon once we've finalised the costs on all the different options. But again, we've been here before. We've done this exercise before. Now, we've looked at all the options that we've looked at previously around, do we have any other buildings that could be converted? Do we have the possibility of securing enough funding for a new build? And we've looked at buildings in other areas as well. And the bottom line is the answer to all of those is realistically no. There is no prospect of raising that funding in the short to medium term. But we have come across another solution when we've looked at what other archives are doing, and that is commercial storage. So we have done an extra piece of work to look at what would it look like if we put some of the archives into commercial storage, where people are obviously utilising buildings that are far more suitable, and obviously you have to pay for that, and retain some of it at the front end alongside the staff presence and the services that they provide. And we've gone through quite a detailed exercise with the main provider of that kind of service. And what I would expect is that we'll be able, within the next probably 2 to 3 weeks, to circulate a document which has a fully costed option appraisal for all of the different options, but particularly a detailed costing for this option. Now, the cost of doing that is going to be more than the cost of the current archive service. So, you know, we don't spend a huge amount on the building, which you can tell if you look at it. But it would free up that building for other uses that might potentially bring in a bit of income that might help fund some of the additional costs that we would need to incur. So it's only ever going to come forward on the basis of this is going to cost more each year, but obviously we'd need to share that 4 ways. And when you balance that up with the income, the amount of money that would have to be input by the different local authorities to provide one of the other solutions, it's an awful lot cheaper. It would be an ongoing revenue cost rather than a one-off capital cost, but the one-off capital cost required from each of us would be huge. The ongoing revenue cost, when it's divided by 4, is likely to be an awful lot more manageable. So I'm not going to sit here today and say it's the perfect solution. We think it'll work and it'll cost X, but it does look as though it's going to be by far the most palatable solution, and we've got to the point where we really have to do something. So if that's okay with you, Chair, we'll finalise that report and circulate it, and I'll share it with my colleagues in the directors of the other authorities where archives sit, just so that they've got an understanding of the potential revenue ask. But it does look as though it's going to be potentially manageable and potentially provide a solution that we can either look at as, well, it's something that'll get us through the next 5 years while we look at fundraising for a new building, or actually is that a longer term solution as well? But that choice doesn't have to be made now, or even when we do look at the different options. That's something that can be looked at over the next 5 years, to be honest. Obviously happy to take any questions on that.
Thank you for the report. Any interest about other authorities with buildings in the area, like Stockton, Redcar, Hartlepool, and Middlesbrough? So any empty buildings or useful?
And the problem with that, Chair, is we've got empty buildings. We've got one that's actually reasonably suitable, but the amount of money we would have to spend on it to meet the standards that commercial storage provides, or that the National Archives will be happy with, is still into the millions. It's actually borderline cheaper to build a new building. Now, you could take the view that anywhere is better than the current building, but we want to try and aim for something that will at least satisfy the National Archives. So we drew a blank on that, again, purely on the basis of if somebody had somewhere that was of a particular standard that would allow the storage to be held at a particular standard, then it becomes a good solution. If it isn't, and it's just a standard building, the costs of retrofitting it to the standard that is required is just astronomical.
Thank you. Councillor Kay.
How many square metres are required to carry out your proposed recommendations?
Oh, I can't remember off the top of my head. I'll look it up while I'm answering the next question, because I've got a document. I don't know whether Ruth can remember what figure we used. You're on mute, Ruth. Sorry.
There are the 2 different figures. There's the cubic metres, which is the whole building, which I get the feeling, I'm trying to remember, I get the feeling it was just over 1,000 cubic metres. Square metres is a little different. We looked at square metres more for our front of house delivery, because you fit onto a different footprint depending on what sort of storage you use. So you can these days get double-decker storage, which allows you to sit on a smaller footprint in terms of square metres. So it's a little bit difficult to give an answer in those terms. It depends on what your building design would be.
Could I just follow that up? So would the building be kept at the correct humidity and all that sort of thing?
Yes, and just to answer your earlier question, it's 700 cubic metres that we're looking at. We went to visit the storage facility, and the company that we've looked at operates 2 levels of storage facility. They have one that is standard for documents, and they have a heritage store as well. So the heritage store is at the very, very highest standards, and they store most of the stuff for a lot of the top museums in the country. But the document store that we visited is temperature controlled. It's got all the appropriate protections for fire and everything else. So I guess you could look at most of the stuff that's in the archive doesn't need specialist storage. It just needs protection, and that's a good enough standard for that. If there were things that we felt needed the extra level of heritage protection, that's available as well. But obviously that'll cost more depending on how much we'd be putting there.
Would the building be within the confines of our authorities, or would it be elsewhere in the country?
The building for the standard storage is in Spennymoor, so it's not a million miles away, and the heritage store is down in Oxford, but they obviously offer a retrieval service.
Just ask one more question then. Really, the public would never enter this building by the sound of it.
No. If the public wanted something that was in the building, it would be ordered through the front end, wherever the front end is, and it would be delivered by this company to the front end for the public to view there.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments?
Chair, Councillor Beale has a question, please.
Councillor Beale.
Thank you. I've unmuted. Thank you, Chair. I find it a little bit hard to follow, especially in this medium, without having had sight of a paper beforehand. And it is an important decision, and I think it's worthy of us all receiving a paper, perhaps even ahead of the senior officers, or at least simultaneously. There's obviously that small issue of budget, which we're all challenged authorities. Not that I don't think there's anyone in the country that isn't, but I think we're particularly challenged, and we'd need to have a close, look at the cost, the cost implications, especially if it's additional revenue money. Not that we have oodles of capital for any bills, but but if it's an ongoing commitment, then that needs to be looked at. And I think there's something attractive about it in terms of as an outline proposal, in terms of getting us freeing ourselves of the headache of housing all the stuff, and focusing on what's probably much more important. That's about the access on the matter. I have a couple of questions, but I think I'd rather absorb a paper and ask a few more. But I mean, there's issues like the curation of the stuff. On my brief visit to the current home of the service, I noticed that there was a lot of work going on in terms of the I don't know whether it's restoration, consolidation, whatever the word is, or it's a range of things that actually doing with the archives themselves. That it does raise questions of, well, who does that bit? And that, I can't imagine that being a cheap service either. So I'd like to see the paper. I wouldn't rule it out of hand just on off the cuff, as it were. There will be a big challenge about any increase in expenditure from, and I would dare say from any of the authorities in the room. It's what are the alternatives, and what are the other costs involved if we do nothing. So looking forward to the paper.
And at this stage, Councillor, all I'm really doing is flagging up that we're doing this exercise. We're nearly at the end of the costing for that element of it, and we will circular that as you've asked. The one thing I would say just on the curation point, or the restoration, or again, whatever it's called, we're assuming that would all still continue as it does now by the staff. So we're not looking to pay for that service anywhere else. It's just we would need to manage what's kept where.
Are you saying about new staff in the Archives Committee or not?
No, what we would anticipate, and again, I don't want to prejudge anything, is that all the staff that currently work in the archives continue to work for the archives and continue to do what they do now, but from a different building. But finding a home for that end of it is an awful lot easier than finding a home for the storage. So they would be separate to the storage using the retrieval system.
Of course, you'll look at the digital preservation of the archive as well.
Yeah, and just one point to kind of bear in mind, that although it's been difficult to invest in the digital stuff, if we do invest more heavily in the digital stuff through external funding or whatever over time, we might be digitising more, but we still have to keep them. So they need to be kept somewhere. So that's a factor that we've taken into account in the options appraisal.
Thanks very much.
Just to follow up, if I can, Jed, is as part of this exercise, are we doing a root and branch review in terms of what it is we actually do need to do? You know, what it is, as well as what it is we need to do, or what it is we need to do. You know, if we're doing that full root and branch, I'd be happy for to say, well, anything can go in this review, or anything, look at all, rather than just do one little part of it, if you know what I mean, in terms of like, well, what is it we really need to do here? I mean, the other thing is about the, do we need does it need to be a service that should wash its own face, in a sense? Should the people who access to it, what's our charging policies and things like that? It seems to me that if we're going to look at a radical change into the way in which we deliver a service and store the stuff, that perhaps we need to, have a radical look at the other things, as well as, things like the income stream. I don't know how much we charge a researcher to do this, but is that, what do the prices look like compared to other places? And I think it's an opportunity to have a good look at it all, really.
It is, and through you, Chair, I would suggest that what we're doing at the moment is looking at the property problem. But when we come and present the solution and say, well, we think this can work, it'll cost X for each of us, there are different ways of making that money either through charging or through other things. But they're questions that will be triggered by whichever solution you bring forward, but it absolutely needs to be considered in that way, yeah.
Any other comments? Councillor Kay.
Yes, I must admit I sort of naively thought that this storage facility would be within the bounds of the old Cleveland County, but obviously it wouldn't be. I do support the idea in principle, by the way. I think it's probably the only way we can afford to move forward. But I did shudder a little bit when Oxford was mentioned, because we've got to think also of the climate change agenda. And we shouldn't be transporting things from one end of the country to another on a frequent basis. So Spennymoor, yes, Oxford, no, as far as I'm concerned. But I think you did say there were different types of facility. So perhaps my black and white approach isn't quite appropriate.
And just to answer that, the two types of storage, the one at Spennymoor, I think will be fine for most of the collection, most of what we have. It may be fine for all of it, but it's just to reassure people, I guess, that there is a fully controlled heritage store available to us should we decide that that's necessary for some elements of it. It's not what I would suggest is necessarily the desired solution for all this, because it's obviously much easier to retrieve stuff from Spennymoor. And I think the storage at Spennymoor is good enough. It's certainly a hell of a lot better than the storage it's in at the moment. But if the National Archives, for example, express a view that actually these kind of items that we might pick out to say that they're of great heritage significance in terms of how long they're kept and how they're kept, we've got that option available to us if we go down this route. It's not a one size fits all for everything.
Yeah, I think there was both the library at Oxford, underground storage near Swindon, I think. Heard about that. I think it's a massive tunnels and you know, storage space down there. Maybe that could be the Oxford scenario.
There is the company that have done the quote for us. They have a very good video showing you what the different bits of it are. So I'll bring that to the next one and as part of the option appraisal, just so you can see it rather than read it on a bit of paper.
Thanks very much. Thank you for your report. I think number 6, we have no items, urgent items with the opinion of the chair will be considered. So we move on to number 7, which is passing a resolution pursuant to section 100A, brackets 4, part 1, the Local Government Act 1972, to excluding the press and public from this exempt items. Can we move the resolution?
So moved.
Thank you. So can we stop the live streaming and then we can have a discussion on the exempt items?
Yes, I'll do that now, Chair, and I'll let you know once the live streaming's ended.
Okay, thank you.